Posted by you/accomplished stop3830. I recently married my longtime girlfriend of 8 years, who I'll call Amy. Important context: while we have been together that whole time, the first 5 years were not exclusive, we did not live together, and for 2 of those years, we were 1,200 miles apart, though we made regular visits. When she and I first met, we were both married but in open relationships. My wife, Amy's husband, and I were required to travel for extremely long periods of time, sometimes years, with minimal opportunities to return home, security contractors. Amy is an ER nurse. 3 months before she and I met, while her husband was home on a 6-month break, she met a local cop and started a relationship with him. We'll call him Chris. He introduced her to some pretty extreme kinks, which she found she deeply enjoyed. Unfortunately, it rapidly escalated beyond anything even remotely healthy and became abusive. This began to rapidly destroy her marriage and family, and despite her husband giving her an ultimatum, she persisted. I was unaware of the abusive and obsessive nature of her relationship with Chris until Amy's husband told me. I had noticed that Amy was becoming increasingly erratic, but I had no explanation. I broke it off with Amy. A month later, she reached out, saying she had realized how toxic the relationship was, that she had broken up with Chris, blocked him, and, if I was interested, would like to start seeing me again. I verified this with her husband, then started sleeping with her again. It was still very much a booty call level relationship at this point. From that point on, over the next 8 years, we grew closer and closer and eventually married. However, about 4 years ago, she mentioned that he had reached out to her regarding some pictures she posted, unrelated, and that they had a good conversation where he asked why she had broken it off with him, and they both reached some closure. I noted that while I was glad for her, how could he have contacted her if she had blocked him? Her reply was that while she blocked his number, she had forgotten to block him on Instagram. I let it go. A couple of years ago, during a conversation with her friend, I found out that during a medical emergency some years back, after she had supposedly blocked him, it was actually Chris who she called to take her to the ER and stay, not this friend. I confronted Amy, and she said that when she told me she had a friend take her, she just didn't think to explain exactly who it was. This has remained a very touchy subject for me, for all the reasons stated. We are also no longer in an open relationship, now that I have stopped traveling, among other reasons. We moved back to the area, to the same town where Chris was an officer, about 2 years ago. A few months ago, just before we got married, she commented that I could be less touchy about Chris now that we were getting married, and, after all, he had retired and moved to Florida, we're in the Midwest. I asked how she knew that, and she said she had read an article about his retirement. Since he retired as a lieutenant and the first K-9 officer, it was barely possible, but I was unconvinced and asked her point blank if she had been talking to him. She said no, point blank. A week ago, I was reading an article about Belgian Malinois and came across an article about Chris attending the retirement ceremony for his former K-9. The ceremony was only 6 months ago, which means he was in the area until very recently. So I dug into it, and I'm good at it. Now, I have all the dates, times, houses, etc., for the man. He retired 9 months ago and left for Florida right after the K-9 ceremony. However, there is no mention in any article of him moving, and there wouldn't be, since he moved well after retiring. So I confronted Amy, and this time she said Chris reached out to her out of the blue via text, and they chatted. When I asked how that was possible if he was blocked, she said he had a new number. We had a big fight, and I've spent a couple of days considering what to do. Right now, I plan to confront her tonight. Even if it's true that she forgot to block him on Instagram, why did she have a conversation when he reached out? Even if she was confused and called him to take her to the ER, why did she hide that from me for years? Even if he randomly texted her, after years, after moving to Florida, using a new number, why did she have a conversation and tell him that she now lives in town? My full intention is to ask for a divorce tonight. Am I overreacting? Edit. For those who've asked for more info, her husband and I are still close. Let's call him Dan. He is still working. The more to the story is that I had a really bad day that left me unable to keep traveling. As soon as I was home full-time and, more to the point, laid up and not earning, my wife divorced me and tried to take the money and the kids. No need for details there, but I wound up with the kids, and the money all got burned on attorneys. Amy had always been the one who had to stay home, so she and I started spending a lot of time together doing life things. Dan was glad to have someone he trusted with her and their kids, and despite me being half speed, he felt good having someone around to keep her from tangling with the wrong crowd. That included Chris, which should have been a bigger red flag than it was, but I still hadn't come out of that king of the hill mentality. So the change happened when I stopped traveling. Amy and I started living together, Dan left permanently, I adopted her kids, and my wife divorced me, lost custody, and kept traveling, though her travels are all stateside. Dan doesn't have, and at this point doesn't want, a romantic relationship with anyone. I'm sure he still has ways of finding relief, but he's allergic to any sort of permanent situation. While he would never be willing to, and I don't want to, have me adopt his kids, they were 14M, 10M and 8F when I met them, 18M, 14M and 12F when I came home for good, and 22M, 18M and 16F now. He has given me power of attorney on their behalf, and they all call me Dad. So, there's that. And yes, I'm sure a lot of people judge all of us for the choices and lifestyle we've made. But we are all human, and the things required of people called to do the things that we do lead to a lot of compromises. We make the decisions we do based on the things we know at the moment. Hindsight is only useful when you start looking forward again. Update 1 day later. First, thank you all. It might seem pretty shallow, but the validation and criticism I've received from the original post really helped me externalize and gain some perspective. Also, some of you are hilarious, some are compassionate and thoughtful, and others made me appreciate that no matter how stupid I get, somebody will find a way to outdo me. Leading with the headline, I had the conversation, I told her I am divorcing her, and it went as badly as expected. She and Chris have not been physical, but we got to the heart of why she has been in touch with him. I am exhausted, but I feel like I now have a clarity of mind and purpose that I've lacked for quite some time. I'll probably feel more chatty tomorrow, but for now, that's what I have. Edit. A more coherent update now that I've slept on it. In another reply in the thread below, I shared my take on what she told me and her reasons, so I won't repeat it all here. And yes, this is my opinion and what I choose to put out there, and I'm sure if she were here, she'd have her own reasons to explain how none of it is her fault. Thinking about it, the pattern is clear. She even admitted as much herself, though we don't always hear what we don't want to hear. All of her relationships have come through our professional community in some capacity or another. She is attracted to the men in it, and the lifestyle, or at least this version of it. She married Dan because he was exciting, dangerous, and mostly absent. She got to have the money, the kids, an exciting husband, and near total independence because he was only home maybe 3 or 4 weeks a year. Given the circumstances, she could also sleep around freely, and so did Dan, to be clear. This was fine until Dan spent an extended period of time at home. There was a lot said about how unfair and unreasonable it is when one of us comes back home with zero idea of how things work, or why, and starts acting as if our opinion of what home life should or shouldn't look like needs to be followed. I get that, actually. Long story short, she was never interested in, and is not interested now, in a normal marriage. She wants and enjoys the lifestyle she had, first with Dan and then with me. It ended with Dan when he came home and tried to play house. It ended with me when I came home long term and tried to do the same thing. For that matter, that's what ended my marriage with my first wife, me coming home and acting like I owned the place rather than being an occasional visitor. Amy did enjoy the more normal life with me, but she also craves the old excitement. She wants to have her cake and eat it too. So she reached back out to Chris because she enjoyed what they did until Chris went too far, and Dan was about to leave home again, leaving her alone with Chris around. There was a bonus excitement for her at the time because she literally got to watch me confront Chris at our home and send him away. But things have changed since then, and the new circumstances mean she could hook up with Chris and do much more extreme things than she does with me while still having me at the house to keep Chris in check. The only catch is that it's no longer on the up and up, so she and Chris would have to sneak around. Maybe that made it more exciting? It almost worked, but I caught on and realized they were in contact, unraveling the whole thing before they had the opportunity to act on it. To add, Chris definitely scratches a bedroom itch that Dan and I did/do not. Dan and I are similar in that we can enjoy some level of kink, but as it escalates, it becomes much too similar to the work-related things we don't want anywhere near our homes. I'm happy to put the handcuffs on and hold you down, but once we get into heavy impact play, cutting, or, God help me, CNC, the level of nope is so high it could put me off for weeks. So yeah, in that regard, Chris is a better lover than I am.